What if we have a teacher who is gay and has a photo of a wedding on her desk? What about the teacher showing pictures from the wedding? Or the teacher goes off to get married and comes back and talks about their spouse? Do we have opt-out provisions for children in that situation? This is not just about books. This is about exposure to people of different sexual orientations and the objection, the sincerely held objection, that children shouldn't be exposed to this.
Bingo.
I think she's got it. By George, she's got it. By George, she's got it.
I doubt it.
In this world, there's two kinds of people, my friend. Those with loaded guns and those who dig. Broadcasting from a Montana wilderness fortress at the headwaters of the Missouri, this is Matt Christiansen Live.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Matt Christiansen Live for Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Thank you for tuning in. I have a new personality making his debut, sitting shotgun tonight. At least new to this role. My friend Robert is here. Thanks for joining. I think is your mic muted? I don't know. We talked about it. I just can't hear you.
I didn't do anything.
Oh, now I can. It's fitting. Well, you make your duct tape production debut with potential duct tape issues. That might have just been me. I couldn't hear you for a second. But anyway, we'll discuss Robert's background a bit here in a minute. People who participate in or listen to my Bible study of several years now, our Bible study, they know that Robert leads that study. So he's a man of legal talents and qualifications as well. So I figured tonight would be the perfect time for Robert to get into the mix on this stream, because both things I want to talk about tonight are Robert areas. We have religion and we have the law. So it's going to be a fun, two very dense topics today. We, of course, had the death of Pope Francis on Monday. We're going to discuss that. And then what's coming next for the Catholic Church. And Robert and I were just talking for like 20 minutes about this Supreme Court argument yesterday about a Maryland school district that is requiring elementary school students to participate in book readings with gay or transgender themes. And the case itself is insane. But the antics of Sotomayor and Jumanji, and a little bit of Kagan too, just completely deranged beyond the facts of the case itself. So I have probably 3 hours worth of things to say about this case. We'll see how it goes. And after that, we'll take some calls. If you'd like to call the show, you can do that through the Discord server, linked in the description. There are instructions and help available for you on the server if you need it. Speaking of, we'll take your super chats before we're out of here as well. And speaking of, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the show. You can do that one time or recurring for as little as $1 a month over on my website. That's mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Support for the show not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make the show possible as well. And there are perks available for your support too. And don't forget, we got lots of new graphics in the merch store as well. T-shirts, mugs, and more. Likewise, merch sales not only help my operation, they support the designers who make these graphics, all of whom are listeners of the stream. mattchristiansenmedia.com/shop. You can find both of those links right there on the homepage of the website, mattchristiansenmedia.com or mattis.gay, if you can't spell my confusing name. I guess I have a First Amendment right to go into a Maryland school district and just show those 10-year-olds mattis.gay. Go to mattis.gay.
That is right. No kid will opt out of that.
New business opportunity, I think. Also got to say hello to our friendly listener-owned business for the evening. That's our friends over at Hero Soap Company. Of course, if you listen to this stream, you know all about Hero Soap Company. You know it's a great-smelling, all-natural, high-quality soap that supports veteran and first responder charities with a portion of each purchase. You know that you can subscribe and get a discount on soap sent straight to your door each month. You never have to remember soap at the store again. You also know that you can get signature soaps designed by yours truly, the Ball Tingler Timberline and the Saloon Doorbuster Old West. But there are fresh, brand new scents available from Hero Soap as well. Over Mountain is a confident, woodsy blend of cedar, fir, and patchouli. Honey plus Bourbon is a strong and smooth, bold and soothing blend with a little vanilla too. As always, get 10% off these new soaps or anything else from Hero Soap Company. Bar soap, liquid soap, shampoo, conditioner, cologne, and more. 10% off using promo code MCListener here at herosoapcompany.com. 10% off everything from our friends at Hero Soap. Promo code MCListener. Of course, find all the information on deals from Hero Soap, plus other great offers from friendly listener-owned businesses like Hope Innovations, Kinney-O Mountain Woodsmithing, Western Razor Company, and more. MattChristiansenMedia.com/deals. Deals by listeners for listeners. All right, Robert, before we hop into it, I figure, well, there's probably a sizable chunk of the audience who doesn't know who you are. So first things first, no, I don't have an illegal immigrant on my stream, but what is Robert's background?
I've been doing the Bible study for a minute, so that's where most people know me from. But I'm originally from Chile, South America. I've been in the States for a little over 20 years. I am a CPA and an attorney, so all of my professional experience is in that, particularly accounting. If you need your taxes done, give me a call. No, I'm kidding, really. I'm mostly out of that business, but and also, of course, I have a huge interest in theology, which is why I've been doing the Bible study. I lived in Texas most of those years, and I recently moved to Arkansas.
Concise. I like that. You're not even going to mention how you did the immigration process the hard way. You didn't hop the fence at Eagle Pass. You actually, you became a U.S. citizen the legal way. So
it took 18 years.
Yeah.
18 years.
So you should have set up a pupusa restaurant down in El Paso or something.
I wish I could say like, oh, I'm so proud I did it the right way. I just feel like an idiot. I'm like, man, I should have just like crossed the river or whatever and become I don't know.
Are you comfortable? And if I put you on the spot, you can just tell me no. But obviously there are financial costs associated with that too. Are you comfortable ballparking the financial costs associated?
So I would divide that into kind of two different sets of financial costs. One, you have the attorney fees and the filing fees, which are several $1,000s. I mean, all in all, I don't remember now. It was over such a long period of time, but well over 10 grand. But there were many years that I had to work for the same employer, and it was almost impossible for me to switch jobs because my immigration process was tied to this. And so I had to take significantly lower wages than I would have taken otherwise. And so when you account for that, the process really cost me many tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. You're a sucker. What can I say? You really got scammed. Hope it was worth it. Welcome to the country.
And I'll probably still be deported to El Salvador. Like, who knows?
Well, I was thinking too, it's like, is this a poor taste joke? They already tried a South American pope too. And so I think you're out of the running for pope as well. You're not going to get selected when the Cardinals make their pick in the coming days or weeks, whatever the schedule may be. But that's the best transition I got into pope talk. So let's get into it. Just before we talk about what to make of the legacy of Pope Francis and what the next steps might be, or who the next pope might be, just a little recap of the facts. And of course, I'm not breaking news here. Most have heard by now, but Pope Francis died Monday morning at 7:35 local time at the Vatican. His cause of death is now released. It was a cerebral stroke that led to a coma and irreversible cardiocirculatory collapse. The Pope had been dealing with other conditions as well, including respiratory failure from pneumonia, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. He was discharged from the hospital a month ago. He had been hospitalized for 38 days prior to that. Hours before his death, Francis delivered his yearly blessing for Easter. He also met with Vice President J.D. Vance on Sunday morning and surprised worshipers when he toured through members of the public at St. Peter's Basilica. Does J.D. Vance have an alibi? Maybe it's just that the Pope was elderly, I guess. But I guess someone had to be kind of like the last guy to meet him. That's the way it works for everybody. But I don't know, it seems kind of crazy. J.D. Vance shows up and the Pope is gone. So Pope Francis was born Jorge Mario you might know that. Do you know his last name? Bergoglio? Is that how I say it? Do you know his name? Anyway.
Where's the screen? I'm looking there.
Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he was the head of the Catholic Church for 12 years from March 2013 until his death. So one of the things I want to talk about with you is the legacy of Francis. Now, Francis, to me, as a non-Catholic layman, has a reputation for being a progressive pope. Somebody who was open to modern new changes in the Catholic tradition. I've also had members of the Catholic faith call into this stream or email into this stream or otherwise message me and say, nah, the guy was kind of unfairly portrayed. Some of his comments were not properly understood. And yeah, he may have said some stuff or done some stuff that is a little bit outside tradition, but it's not as bad as it's sometimes presented. So I have a bunch of examples of stuff that he's done and said, but Robert, I assume you have more knowledge on the Pope than I do. And I just invite you to give your take on the legacy of this Pope. Is he a pink hair crazy, or was he something more traditional than maybe some people perceive?
I think he was a mixed bag. His conservative achievements, those are kind of easy to list. There's a famous interview. It was here in the U.S. Somebody asked him, the interviewer, who was a lady, asked him, hey, do little girls and women have any hope of becoming priests one day? And he looks at her just with this dead face and just goes, no.
Shut up, bitch!
I haven't seen it, but I'll take your word for it.
It is a great clip. He also opposed trans surgeries. Now, the way that he phrased it was that like transition technology was evil. He did not condemn the people who were performing those procedures. It's not like he said doctors who perform those are evil, but he condemned the surgery, or rather the technology itself, which perhaps it was just his way of being quite gracious. But that certainly was a highlight.
Now, on the topic of women, I'm reading in this. So I found this summary to be pretty helpful in the feminist publication, the 19th, on like it's just summarizing some of the progressive things he's done and said. I'll take your point on the interview about women. The context was women becoming priests. Is that what he said? Okay. So it's a hard no on that. However, this reporting says he did put more women in leadership positions in the Vatican than any other pope. Is that accurate?
I believe that it is. And so, yeah, I think he was trying to be as progressive as he could within that traditional boundary of women not being allowed into the priesthood. What you're saying about women is right in line with what he did with cardinals. He appointed more cardinals from unrepresented countries than any pope in the past. In fact, he significantly increased the number of cardinals, and many of them came from countries that had never had a cardinal before. I believe, and people should fact check me on this statistic, but I believe by this point, the makeup of cardinals is only about 40% European, when before this pope, that percentage was significantly higher. And so it makes sense that he would have also appointed women to the extent that he could.
I did read that, and that's accurate, at least according to this report, or maybe one of the other ones I read. But obviously that's going to become relevant for the selection of the next pope, too. The fact that the cardinals are no longer majority European may influence the selection. But I found some commentary, because this report says exactly what you've said about transgenderism, that it was that he had comments to the effect of that is a rejection of God's design. You shouldn't be doing that. Okay, the record on homosexuality is maybe a little dicier, and this is one where I, as a layman outsider, feel well, I've heard both sides of it, that he is blessing gay weddings, and then I've heard that no, it's kind of misunderstood and it's more technical and specific than that. But one piece of commentary I found to be rather questionable in this report is from early on in his papacy. That's the term, right? His papacy. So when he first became pope in 2013, he was asked about gay priests, and he responded, "If someone is gay and he searches the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" And maybe you could add some context to that for me. Now, I know the Pope is not God, but his position is judgment and moral leadership. I know that he's not supposed to go out there and just condemn everyone to hell or something. But I'm saying he's in a position of leadership on moral questions. And the answer to a fundamental moral question like homosexuality cannot be, who's to say, really? Probably you, because you're in a leadership position to say. Am I misunderstanding what he means by that? I know you might not know the exact context of this quote, but does that fit your understanding of him, or is this kind of out of left field?
No, that very much fits. So he wrote a letter regarding gay marriage, and he decided that priests were okay to bless gay marriages. And it is effectively the same kind of thinking where he does not outright affirm it, but he kind of blurs the line. And I'm going to read the text from the letter itself. Now, the question is effectively, is gay marriage valid? Should we recognize it? And I'm paraphrasing. People can find this letter. It's takes 2 seconds to Google it. But this is part of the answer. So he says, for this reason, the church avoids any type of rite or sacramental that might contradict this conviction. And he's referring to the conviction that a marriage is between a man and a woman. And so, and imply that something that is not marriage is being recognized as a marriage. So he is saying, no, a marriage is between a man and a woman. But then he goes on to say this: nevertheless, in our dealings with people, we must not lose pastoral charity, which should permeate all our decisions and attitudes. The defense of objective truth is not the only expression of this charity. It also includes kindness, patience, understanding, tenderness, and encouragement. Therefore, we cannot become judges who only deny, reject, and exclude. And it is for this reason that it's okay to give some sort of blessing to gay marriages.
So when he says blessing, is he talking about blessing the activity or the conduct of the marriage, or is he blessing the people in it? I guess what I'm asking is he viewing this as like a love the sinner, hate the sin thing, or is he actually affirming the sin?
Okay, so that's such a good question, because he further blurs the line, because he actually defines blessing in the very document in this context. So he says, for this reason, I'll just read it. It's very short. Pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are forms of blessing requested by one or more persons that do not convey an erroneous conception of marriage. For when one asks for a blessing, and this is the key part, one is expressing a petition for God's assistance, a plea to live better, and confidence in a Father who can help us live better. And so is he saying that this blessing is, may your gay marriage become better, become more godly, or may you become more godly and so end the gay marriage? And it certainly sounds like the former, but he phrases it just right so you can't tell which of the two he means.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it in that way. So you're saying one conceivable way would be, I bless this in the hope that you actually leave the homosexuality.
Yeah, that's certainly not what any of the priests who want to bless these marriages would do, but you could, if you're trying to be as charitable as possible, you could say, well, the blessing is for these people to just live better in the future. And that could involve leaving an atypical relationship.
Yeah, well, and that's why I was curious about context here. I totally understand blessing the person or hoping the best for the person in the same way you hope the best for any person who engages in sin. And I'm not even singling out gay people as sinners in that way. We are all sinners in one way or another. And so you bless people who sin by definition. To the extent you bless people, you bless sinners. But yeah, are you actually endorsing the activity? And I still don't feel clear on that. I've never felt clear on his stance on that. But if what you're saying is correct, it's like it was intentionally blurry. It was just kind
I
of.
think it was. It
Okay.
was. And Catholics had to carry water for the Pope. I mean, like you had all these Catholic apologists, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I hope that what we're discussing is not insulting any Catholics in your audience. But the more conservative Catholics had to take these comments that were, I think, intentionally vague and say, "Oh, you can interpret them this way, and then it's fine." But if I'm being completely honest, I mean, I do think this is a blessing of the union, as in, who are we to judge? Maybe there's something good that can happen in this gay marriage.
There's also some controversy on abortion, and I have heard, the Pope said this, the Pope said that. So I don't know. I guess I don't know what my preconception was. But if this reporting is correct, the Pope has always said that abortion is murder or a sin. If he's been squishy on it, it's maybe in some of the same ways on the gay issues where he has advocated for forgiveness for abortion or people who have abortions or people who perform abortions. So maybe he's been more forgiving than others, if not excusing or endorsing the activity. Would that be close to your understanding?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think actually this Pope stood quite strongly on the abortion issue. I think there's a quote attributed to him, and I don't have the full context of this, but I think he said that having an abortion is like hiring a hitman to solve a problem, which is like the most base take about abortion. Yeah. So, he had a deep concern for divorced people, particularly divorced women, single mothers. And so I think the fact that he had a soft spot in his heart for women who had abortions is very much in keeping with him. But no, I feel like he actually was pretty solid on this matter.
I was, when I read about his comments on surrogacy, I was surprised by as well, at least in my mind, as a guy who has a progressive reputation. I'll read you an example here at the end of the reproduction section of this reporting. In a declaration he approved in March 2024, so a year ago, Pope Francis once again called for an end to the practice of surrogacy, which he compared to trafficking, and argued that people do not have a right to a child because that approach fails to respect the dignity of that child as a recipient of the gift of life. I deem deplorable, careful there, Hillary, I deem deplorable the practice of so-called surrogate motherhood, which represents a grave violation of the dignity of the woman and child based on the exploitation of situations of the mother's material needs. A child is always a gift and never the basis of a commercial contract. That is about as clear a position on the issue, and I believe as morally square as one could articulate. So for whatever question you have maybe about abortion, this guy saw it clearly on surrogacy and the practice, this kind of modern rent-a-womb practice of like, well, I want a baby, but I don't want it the natural way because of reasons X, Y, and Z. That commentary that's as clear as could be, I think.
Yeah. Amen and amen. Like, that's great. He was very solid on that.
Then we get to things that I think are very questionable. The immigration commentary, I think you might be able to offer some more insight on whether there's some sort of scriptural soundness to this. To me, this is political idiocy, but also wild hypocrisy. On the issue of immigration, when asked about Trump's campaign promise to build a wall back in 2016, the Pope responded that anyone who builds a wall rather than a bridge is not Christian. And I've never been to the Vatican. I've seen some photography. I think they have tall walls around the Vatican. Do they not?
I think they do. Now they keep the gates open, but that's because they're not under attack. I mean, because I feel like sometimes people say that, well, the gates are always open. Yeah. Let's put him in slight danger and see how long those gates remain open.
And then you actually had a letter. It's my understanding that even if popes get a little political, they kind of have a tradition of not attacking specific people or even specific policies. Is that fair to say? Okay. Francis may have bucked that trend a little bit. At least in this reporting, they're calling it an unusually targeted letter to the American bishops. That was earlier this year in February. He took direct aim at Trump's policy of mass deportations. He said, quote, "I have followed closely the major crisis that is taking place in the United States with the initiation of a program of mass deportations. The rightly formed conscience cannot fail to make a critical judgment and express its disagreement with any measure that tacitly or explicitly identifies the illegal status of some migrants with criminality." How dare you call that illegal status criminal? Some might say they're synonyms, but I guess maybe they have a little bit of distinction.
Yes. So I had pulled up that letter as well. This is it's a long letter. It's a well thought out letter. And I say that to mean this is not the Pope speaking like off the cuff, maybe, like saying things he didn't mean. No, like he outright rejects the concept that illegal immigration can be equated with a crime. Like it's essentially the foundation of open borders. And then he goes further. That same paragraph, the quote you read, if you keep reading that paragraph in the original letter, he goes on like this. It says, "That said, the act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment." Notice that one, just because of climate change.
No, that's the last point. I have that coming up in a minute.
"Damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness." So he outright this is open borders. If somebody came to your country because they were poor in their own country, you should not deport them.
Okay. And one of the reasons they might come to your country is it's very hot in their home country, so they need to cool off. And I found this. I don't remember listening to this speech that he gave in 2015 when he visited the White House, but I guess I found it surprising that was that his only visit to the U.S. I can't remember. Did he come here otherwise? I don't know.
I'm not sure on that one.
Anyway, he comes to the U.S. in September 2015, and he gives a speech at the White House. And according to this reporting, he spent more time on climate change than any other subject. Part of what he said was, quote, "It seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment in history. Or of history. We still have time to make the changes needed to bring out a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change." This one just confuses me the most. I just don't see, I don't know, you're very scripturally well read. Are there scriptural commentaries on environmentalism, global health, that sort of stuff? Or is this just like pure politician stuff?
Well, I would say if you want to make the argument, you would say that, but from, this is clear in Genesis 1, we are to take care of the earth. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very true. I think every Christian would affirm that we do have a responsibility to creation, to take good care of it, to be kind to animals, like a Christian would oppose, for example, animal cruelty and so forth. And so there certainly is that aspect of being good keepers of the earth. But the argument that he seems to make is that climate change affects people, particularly the poor, and that is why this is such a big deal. Now, to be fair, I guess he makes both arguments. I shouldn't misrepresent him, but I do think that second argument is quite strong in his writing. He wrote an encyclical, a letter on this as well, and he very much makes that connection that climate change disproportionately affects the poor, which is kind of exactly what we hear from, the left wing politically.
So in the Robert verdict, would you say that the characterization of him as a progressive pope, is that legit? Is that a little bit unfair? What's the ruling here?
Well, let me give you two other points of data, and then I will disclose my ruling. But okay. There's two things we have not mentioned. One, he was interviewed by a Catholic publication. I'll try to find the name real quick. I had it in front of me. Oh, it's called American Magazine, and I believe it is an outright Catholic publication. He was asked about communism and Marxism, and he said, well, essentially the Bible doesn't kind of map exactly to some political ideology, but if he looks at the Bible from just a socio-political lens, then yes, he is a communist and Jesus would have been a communist.
Wow. Okay.
And he says it outright. I mean, I have the quote in front of me. And so as here, I'll read it. If I see the gospel in a sociological way only, yes, I am a communist, and so too is Jesus. His words. And so he was quite radical in the interpretation that Jesus would have been a communist is really untenable. I mean, even let's assume the strongest version of the argument that Jesus would have preferred a community of believers that held everything in common. I don't think that's the case, but let's assume that for a second. Jesus makes no indication that we should impose that system on other people, which is what communism would be. It wouldn't just be Christians living in some sort of commune. It would be literally them rising to power and saying, everyone shall live this way. And that's just, like I said, untenable. So that's a pretty radical thing that he said. And again, the quote is not hard to find by any means. And then here this happened in the last year, I believe. He was speaking to some children in Singapore, and he made a statement that very much sounded like religious pluralism, where he outright stated all religions are paths to reach God. He said, and this is a quote, they are, to make a comparison, like different languages, different dialects to get there, but God is God for everyone. And then it goes on.
Well, who would he be to judge? I don't
Indeed.
know. No.
This quote was so edgy that on the official Vatican translation of the quote, they intentionally mistranslated it.
They did the old Joe Biden White House transcript bit? All right.
100%. They made it sound less edgy, and people caught on to it. And so they had to correct their translation and actually faithfully translate what the Pope said. And so was this Pope a mixed bag? Yes. I think he was very based on some things, abortion, surrogacy. But I think he was quite religiously and politically liberal. I think that's hard to deny.
So where do you think the Catholic Church is going to go next? Whether you have like a specific guy that you think is the pick, or a direction, like where will they go philosophically? You mentioned before, and that's confirmed in this BBC reporting. Yeah, for the first time in history, fewer than half of those given a vote will be European. So maybe just geography influences the vote. But what do you think?
Yeah. So in the Christian world right now, there's this concept of the global South, which is effectively the Southern Hemisphere, but without the areas that were influenced by Western Europe. So like the global South does not include Australia, New Zealand. It doesn't include Hong Kong. It's a very like selectively drawn out map. But at any rate, people who are more progressive in the church are making this push that the global South needs to be more represented in the church. This is not just going on with Catholics. I want to be fair. This is happening all over the Christian world. Well, this Pope made a significant effort to include more cardinals from the global South. And the theology in the global South is more progressive, particularly in South America. You have what's called liberation theology, which reinterprets the gospel to effectively be a form of communism. I know that that's a summary, but it's pretty fair. At this point, of the cardinals who are voting, roughly 80% of them were appointed by this Pope. And I would venture to guess that most of those 80% are quite liberal. And so I think this will have a dramatic effect in who is elected next. And then from then on, it's hard to stop that snowball. Like, because that next pope will also effectively elect the electors, and this will go on.
Do you have a specific guy on this long list? Do you see anyone on there that is a pick for you, or are you leaving it to the imagination?
Filipino on there? If you search for Philippines.
Yeah, I think I saw him earlier right here. This guy?
Yes.
His name is Luis Antonio Gokim Tagle.
Yeah. Now, of course, he's like playing March Madness. The odds that I'm correct are next to 0, so I don't need the hate emails later to tell me that. Like, I grant that. But this guy checks all the boxes. He is from the global south. He is very LGBTQ friendly, and so I think he checks the boxes for what people want to see. If I had to guess.
I was reading about the I guess racially progressive push for a black pope, and I was thinking that I don't know the history, but I just in my mind I thought, well, this would be the first black pope, right? Maybe not though, and actually the history is kind of unclear from what I read. But according to this reporting in Reuters, scholars researching the early church have cited evidence that some first millennium popes were born in North Africa or were of African descent, though the details are few. And one or more may have been black, so it would be the first modern black pope. But if they go that direction of like a racially progressive choice, like the cliche DEI pope, I suppose, is what you would call it. If they do, let's say they pick like a black pope from Africa, the irony is all of those guys are way more conservative or traditional in their approach than Francis was. And so you might make like a what seems like a progressive pick that actually returns the church to much more traditional teachings and stances. So if that's the direction it goes, that'll be interesting to watch.
Oh, it would be amazing. This is when you need your sounder there. Why are you gay? That would be the new.
Hold on, I don't have it ready, but it's in here.
Why are you gay?
That's right. That was like a Nigerian guy or something, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
You see this in other churches. Like take the Methodists, for example. And I won't go into too much of this. I'm sure your audience, is not all that interested. But the UMC, the United Methodist Church, in the US is incredibly progressive. They are the ones who have like transgender people preaching, and they will do like weird dances in church. Like there are scandalous stories that come out of the UMC. Well, the African UMC churches are super conservative, and they have desperately been trying to get out of the UMC, and the UMC will not let them go because they want the progressive points. They want to say, well, look, we have such a big presence in Africa. And in the meantime, Africans are going, we don't want you.
They're holding black people captive for their ends, you say. Well, all right.
But somehow that's progressive.
Call it what you want. Yeah. Holding people captive to tell them how it is, I guess, is the new progressive value, or not even new. That seems whenever you embrace unnatural things, you ultimately have to resort to coercion, though. The argument of the Montgomery County School District in front of the Supreme Court is we're not coercing at all. We're just we're merely exposing those children to ideas that some might consider to be adult. Anyway, that was my transition into the Supreme Court case. I didn't mean to cut you off. You had more to say about the Pope, but
no, that was a phenomenal transition.
Okay. Well, I guess I ruined it. But all right, I have as much or more to say about this Supreme Court case than we had to say about the Pope. So probably in store for a little bit of a long stream. But let me go through just the facts and some of the context for this case that was at the Supreme Court for argument yesterday. Because the facts are completely insane, but the argument that happened yesterday was also completely insane. This was one of the most entertaining Supreme Court oral arguments I've heard in a long time. But the general idea of this case is this. The Montgomery County School District, this is Maryland, I wonder if Maryland man's kids go to, that's not Baltimore, is it? Maryland father, do his children go here? I don't know. A lot going on in Maryland these days. But Montgomery County School District requires elementary school kids to hear stories involving LGBTQ themes. So a couple of these books that are a part of this new curriculum. You have Uncle Bobby's Wedding, which features a gay character who's getting married. Another is called Born Ready. It's about a transgender child who wants to identify as a boy. And the perspective of the school district is, look, your kid is going to hear about these gay wedding or transgender stories because we're promoting tolerance and civility and respect for different lifestyles. And the parents, the ones who are involved in this lawsuit, they are Muslims and Muslim and Catholic families, Muslim and Catholic parents, and they just want to opt out. They're not looking to ban these books. They're not looking to block your kid from hearing this story at school. They just don't want their kids to be exposed to these lessons, if you want to call them that, in elementary school at their age, or, you know, maybe just by these teachers in general. It's not their role. They want to just remove their kids from that lesson and then go to school as normal otherwise. But the school's stance after a change is they're forced to participate. So you don't have an opt-out. Your kid has to hear the gay wedding story or the transgender story, or else I guess they just can't go to school here. The parents are saying that the forced participation violates their First Amendment rights to free exercise of their religion. And the case is Mahmoud v. Taylor. So Mahmoud is one of these Muslim parents, and Taylor is the superintendent of the school district. So a little bit more on the factual background here. The facts relevant to this case, they began in 2022. The Montgomery County School Board approved several of these LGBTQ inclusive children's books that are going to be included in their language arts program. So in other words, this is English class. We're going to hear stories about gay weddings and transgenderism in English class. And one of these gay books was added to the curriculum for each year from pre-kindergarten through 5th grade. Okay. This is not like you're reading a book in your high school English class that may have questionable themes about sexuality or violence or any of those. We're talking about very young children here, pre-kindergarten, elementary school age kids. Now, teachers themselves are not actually required to read these gay books. The gay books are a part of the available curriculum, but they're not required to present them. That said, if your kid's teacher chooses to read from one of these books, as a student at that school, you must participate in the reading. You will hear the gay wedding and the transgender story. And at first, the school notified these parents of these books, and they planned on accommodating requests to opt out. But then they got so many of these opt-out requests that they changed the policy in March of 2023. No more opt-outs. At least no more opt-outs for any reason, because they didn't like that so many parents were opting out for non-religious reasons. Now, just from a moral perspective, I don't like that any parent's objection for any reason is treated differently than, say, a sincerely held religious objection. I think that morally speaking, they are the same thing. Now, I get as a matter of law, as a matter of the First Amendment, they may not be. But the school was irked that a lot of parents are saying, I'm not doing that, and I'm not even going to tell you why. That's just degenerate nonsense, and I'm not going to do it. The school wants you to go there and say, well, because I've been a sincerely practicing Christian or a sincerely practicing Muslim, religious objection. I'm not diminishing a religious objection, of course. I just don't like that, like, for some reason, parents who object on a non-religious basis are presumed to be less legitimate. Anyway, the school didn't like how many objections or opt-outs they got, and so they said no more opt-outs. And then this, you might be able to correct me on this, because I thought they changed the policy. We'll get to the appeals court in a second. I thought they changed the policy after there were so many opt-outs, but it maybe I have that backward. Anyway, or no, I guess what I meant was I thought the lawsuit was filed after the change in policy, but maybe the lawsuit was filed before the change in policy.
So the school started rejecting the opt-out request before they even formally changed their policy. So they just
I see.
kind of out of nowhere started rejecting them. The lawsuit was filed, and then the school updated the policy so that in the future, unless they lose, it is clear that they will no longer honor the opt-out request.
Got it. So then the parents sue and they sue the school district and the superintendent. Again, First Amendment claim, free exercise claim. The federal district court sided with the school district in August 2023. The case has been appealed to the Supreme Court. And I was unclear how they got through the appeals court, and there's some dispute about that process at the Supreme Court. But before we get into the arguments at the court yesterday, you want to catch us up on what happened at the appellate courts or the appellate court.
So, what's key procedurally here is that this is not a case that is being decided on the merits, not yet. We are looking for an injunction, okay? Or by we, I mean, of course, the plaintiff is looking for an injunction. And injunctions, it is an extraordinary remedy. So normally you have a pretty high bar that you have to clear before the court will grant this. Now, I can't stand the irony because it seems like courts are putting injunctions on Trump left and right, like, we're just handing them out for free. But in this case, the court is very concerned that an injunction is this unusual remedy. And because all that has happened so far is that the school denied the request, but the kids still have not been exposed, then there's no evidence in the record that the kids have suffered some kind of harm, or there's not an example of a teacher saying something outrageous. Because
they have yet to force the kid to listen to the gay wedding story. They just want to.
Indeed.
Okay.
And because the kids have not yet been exposed, both of the lower courts, meaning the trial court and the Court of Appeals, have said, well, there's just nothing on the record that shows injury that would justify the injunction. And essentially hinting that, well, maybe if you came to us with a separate set of facts where this or that has been said, maybe we would reconsider. But now the Supreme Court has this very tricky question: is exposure alone injury, so that we would grant the injunction? And with that, I think that the clips that you're about to show, are queued up, they will make sense.
Yeah, and I think that's an important qualifier because I didn't follow what happened at the appeals court. I don't think that makes a lot of the clips I'm going to play make much more sense, but it's an important qualifier in that this seems like a pretty straightforward free exercise case, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. If it has an Achilles heel whereby it might, air quotes, fail, what failure here would be like the Supreme Court saying, well, the injury itself hasn't happened yet, and so we're just going to defer, I guess, to the lower courts or something until that happens, or we're going to reject this for now. You can come back once your kid has been read the story, little Billy. You're going to hear all about it. That would be the technicality that I could see a Roberts organized majority coalescing around if something like that happened. But the way this hearing went, I mean, this was a disaster for the school district, but it was a disaster for logical thinking and coherence. This was pure insanity. And I want to walk through some of the arguments because I think you just have a very clear and concise argument from the parents, not just on the First Amendment case law, and I know it's not the Supreme Court's job to evaluate moral truth, but that kind of inherently works its way into a decision like this. There's just a very clear argument on one side, legally, morally, and a very complicated, technical, hair-splitting, nonsensical argument from the side that wants to forcibly read your kids' books about gay weddings and transgenderism and the like. So let's start with the arguments from the parents, and this is what I consider to be straightforward. The parents are saying, consistent with past Supreme Court precedent, you have a First Amendment right not to be coerced into speech or beliefs or actions, I suppose, that violate your religious beliefs. I'm a Christian. I believe X. You can't force me to do Y in violation of X. That's the idea. There's a broad history of case law to that effect. They say the school curriculum here is going, the parents are saying the school curriculum is going beyond the mere exposure that you're talking about. And as I was saying when we're offline, mere exposure is a legal term. It means the idea in the First Amendment context is just because you've been presented with an idea doesn't mean the idea was endorsed, doesn't mean you were coerced to accept the idea. So in the First Amendment context, if I if I'm a creationist and I encounter the idea of evolution in biology class, so long as it is not pummeled into my brain, I probably don't have a First Amendment free exercise claim. So when you hear the term mere exposure, in this context, it makes me think of trenchcoat guy. What's wrong? I'm merely exposing your children to this spectacle. That's what they mean when they say mere exposure. Parents are saying this curriculum goes beyond mere exposure, as in we're just saying that like gay marriage is a thing, transgenderism is a thing. It goes beyond that and saying those are good. And you will accept them or you'll be a bad person. Like they're taking a stance on the validity, the goodness, the value of these things. And so that's where the religious views and the free exercise are violated. It's a coercive thing. It's advocating that these kids believe a certain thing. And again, these parents just want an opt-out. They don't want control of the school curriculum. They don't want to ban others from seeing these lessons, participating in these lessons. They just want the right to have their kids opted out from these lessons. And as we'll get to, many try to frame this as these parents trying to ban others in that way, like nobody's going to learn about gay weddings. Nobody's going to learn about transgenderism. Somehow indirectly is the argument, but Kavanaugh asks the lawyer for the parents and the lawyer for the federal government, who I guess joined the parents in this case. We have a deputy solicitor general who was before the court. Anyway, just to clarify, you guys only want to opt out, right? You're not here trying to restrict others. That's correct.
You're not seeking to prohibit instruction in the classroom. You're just seeking not to be forced to participate in that instruction.
That's correct.
Your position in this case is that you're not seeking to alter the instruction in the classroom or what's the content of the classroom. You're only seeking not for these children to be forced to remain in the classroom, correct?
Exactly.
Now, of course, they would say that. They would say that because that's their position of advocacy. I would say they would say that because it's true. But if you're taking the position that it's not true, you have to create some kind of boogeyman. Like, really, what they're doing is using X to get to Y. And this is where Kagan goes. If you can opt out and say your friends can opt out, then all of a sudden you've created an untenable situation in which you have indirectly, effectively banned the material for others. This to me is such a desperate argument from Elena Kagan.
Let me ask what the next step of that is. Suppose there are things that, students opt out of, and then, the parents think it's just not really fair that my kid has to leave the classroom or has to put on, headphones or, has to otherwise be made to feel isolated. So the next challenge is really the class can't do this either.
Is it though? Is that where it's going? At no point have these parents talked about trying to control others. They want to control their own kids. Regardless, though, the free exercise claim they're making would never apply in that situation. I have a free exercise right to stop you from hearing about certain topics. Can you make any sense of Kagan's argument there, or do you agree that it's just pure desperation? That's the only way I can interpret it.
I think she's very aware of the fact that most kids were opting out. And so what ended up happening is that the kids that didn't opt out effectively got singled out. Because if you have a class of 20 kids, let's say, and 18 single out of the gay stuff, opt out of the gay stuff, and then 2 kids stay in the class, well, now it's kind of embarrassing for them. It's like, oh yeah, they're the only
You're a faggot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I hate my parents. They made me sit.
Yes. And so I'm telling you, I think that's what she's thinking, because that's what happened in this case. And she's going, well, shoot, we're so unpopular that then no one will do this.
No, it was democratically decided. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, so the parents' argument is pretty simple. And I've gone through it. They have to try to complicate it to try to discredit it, because on its own and taken as described, it's a perfectly credible, perfectly legally square argument as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you see some holes in it. I mean, I really don't. But that I interpret Kagan's commentary there too. It's like, let's muddy this up a little bit. We have to try to put some dings in it to try to make it seem like something it's not, because otherwise this is hopeless. So you get that's the argument from the parents. That brings us to the arguments for the school district. And the school district's arguments are a couple things. One, that allowing these opt-outs, it's just not practical. Now, I wasn't aware that defending constitutional rights has to be practical or they don't count, but we'll get to that. I think the more important argument they're making is these lessons aren't coercive. They don't rise to the issue of free exercise protections because, again, it's the mere exposure idea. It's like, well, we're just presenting an idea. We're not telling these kids which way to believe. If there's no coercion and they're just presenting ideas neutrally, they're not violating the First Amendment. That's their strongest argument, in my opinion. Now, I know you've got plenty of items submitted to the record that would suggest that they do, in fact, have a very strong opinion about these things. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's take on this practicality point. Because the lawyer for the school district says that allowing everyone to opt out of anything, well, it really makes the school, it makes it impossible for the school to function. And so Thomas asks him, well, why doesn't an opt-out work to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve? He says, well, it really just makes it pretty hard on the school.
Every day in public elementary school classrooms across the country, children are taught ideas that conflict with their family's religious beliefs. Children encounter real and fictional women who forego motherhood and work outside the home. Children read books valorizing our nation's veterans who fought in violent wars. And children in Montgomery County read books introducing them to LGBT characters. But learning about them is not a legally cognizable burden on free exercise. Adopting petitioners' view of the case would conscript courts into playing the role of school board, a task for which this court has recognized they are ill-suited. And a constitutional requirement to provide opt-outs from anything someone finds religiously offensive would mean public schools must find alternative classrooms, supervision for young students, and substitute lessons each time a potentially offensive topic arises. Petitioner's rule would require courts to adjudicate an infinite variety of curriculum challenges brought by parents with different religious beliefs.
Couldn't you solve those differences simply by restoring the opt-out?
I think in this case, the record makes clear that the school district did try to honor the opt-out, and at some point it became infeasible.
Okay, but that's to the point that you're making before. If it was always impractical or not feasible, why was that the starting point? And how did it become impractical or unfeasible? Is it because lots and lots of people opted out? Your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the response to that should be like, well, maybe schools should not teach something that the vast majority of parents request an opt-out for. Because this is the democracy argument, right? The parents have spoken. They don't want that taught. And it doesn't seem crazy that the school district would be responsive to the wishes of the parents. But I guess, nope, when it comes to education of children, we shall impose it top down.
And so if this isn't practical, that's news to every school district across the country that has practically implemented this sort of opt-out in the context of sex ed or other sensitive topics. That this lawyer was asked by the justices several times, can you name another district in the country that has this policy? No, I cannot. Strange. So everybody else does it differently than you do, as in they offer opt-outs, and you're the only district that just can't manage the practical complexity of achieving something like an opt-out. It's if there is any truth to it, like you're saying, if it is a mess, the mess is because of mass rejection. Like maybe a handful of kids opt out of sex ed, and the rate of opt-out is 20%, 10%. If the opt-out is 75, then if your main curriculum has a minority of students and your substitute curriculum has most of them there, all of a sudden, I guess that is like an awkward situation to deal with because you worked so hard on something that nobody's going to listen to.
They're all bigots, darn it. But let me say this, though. I do find the lawyer's argument to be quite strong.
What?
Yes.
Okay. How so?
I think the court will have a very hard time making a difference between this and the examples that he provided. Like, let's say that, every day, like he said, every day across America, children come across stories of women working outside the home.
Yeah.
And I guess implying that some people religiously believe that women should not work outside the home.
Yes.
So he's like, well, are we going to allow opt-outs for that? And then, right, he goes through example after example. And I do think that those are analogous examples. So the court has to draw a line between showing gay stuff to kids and just having these other situations presented to kids or older students. So I do think that this case will come down to something unusual about young children and the topic of sex.
Which everybody knows to be true. This lawyer would try to argue around it, but everybody knows that to be true. However, from a First Amendment line drawing perspective, if you have to draw a line that says, say, the free exercise rights of the parents of a 16-year-old are different in X way from the free exercise rights of the parents of a 6-year-old, that does get pretty messy, to your point. So we'll see how they handle that. But on the practicality point, Kavanaugh asked a great question, which is, why isn't the opt-out a win-win? Like, the school wants to teach this. Some parents don't want to hear it. Why isn't just letting them go read a book in the other room a win for everybody? And why won't you take that win?
The whole goal, I think, of some of our religion precedents is to look for the win-win, to look for the situation where you can respect the religious beliefs and accommodate the religious beliefs while the state or city or whatever it may be can pursue its goals. And here, they're not asking you to change what's taught in the classroom. They're only seeking to be able to walk out so that they don't have to, so the parents don't have their children exposed to these things that are contrary to their own beliefs.
I understand, Your Honor, and there may well be circumstances where a school can or a school district can engineer the win-win. Montgomery County schools try to accomplish an educational goal of introducing these books for a particular purpose. They then attempted to accommodate religious opt-outs in the school, and they weren't able.
Mr. Shaw.
Again, they weren't able. Is it that they feasibly can't do the opt-out, or is it how many people opted out, as we've discussed? But if it's the latter, if it's how many people opted out, I mean, then you're saying it without saying it. Yes, we have to coerce people to listen to this. And that's the entire problem. At one point, the school district lawyer, he went even further, and this was responding to Barrett. And he said, I know what he means in this context, but when you hear it just on its own, it sounds kind of crazy. He says that parents have no right to shield their kids from objectionable material at all.
You concede that would show interference with hindering of a parent's right to...
I don't, because I think the parent's right to shield their children from offensive curricular materials is no greater than the child's right to be free from offensive curricular materials. And if, on our theory of the case, children have no right to be shielded from offensive curricular materials that share a view that conflicts with their religious belief, parents don't have a greater right than to shield their children from
counsel.
So the child's right is 0 and the parent's right is also 0. What he means, and you tell me if you agree with this assessment, I understand him to be making a technical First Amendment argument, again, that mere exposure to an idea is not coercion. So you don't have a First Amendment right against mere exposure to an idea that you disagree with. And so if the child doesn't have that right, the parent doesn't have that right. However, just to layman ears, when I hear a guy saying like, well, I mean, really, if the child has no right against this, what right does the parents have? They're my freaking kids, dude. That's what the right is. I know that your like First Amendment case law book says X, Y, and Z, but do you hear yourself right now? Do you understand? Do you think I'm correct in that understanding, or am I missing something?
No, I think you're exactly correct. So the legal standard that is ruling this case, I mean, everything will stand or fall on this legal standard of you have a constitutional right to be free from two things: the government compelling you to believe something or to act in a certain way. And most often, exposure to something does not check either box. It doesn't compel belief and it doesn't compel action. And so what the lawyer is saying is that is true always, that in no instance of exposure can you check either box. And so there is simply no constitutional right by the parents or the children to be free of this. Now, what I would have loved for somebody to ask is, okay, under that standard, then you cannot opt out of your children being exposed to pornography.
It did come up a little bit. Actually, you know where it comes up? We'll get to Sotomayor being insufferable later, because the lawyer for the parents made that point, and she just interrupted the hell out of him, so he never got to explain it. But yeah, I mean,
because if there's no instance in which exposure checks either box at all, ever, fine. Then I guess kids can be exposed to pornography, and there's nothing parents can do about it.
What about literal exposure of the teacher just flashing them? I mean, is that...
Yeah.
It's a stone's throw away, I suppose. Anyway, I just ripped Kagan for making absurd arguments about scenarios that aren't happening, so maybe I shouldn't do that myself. However, I think my scenario of teachers forcibly flashing children is much more realistic than her scenario of gay promotion being banned indirectly out of these schools. Anyway, okay, so the other point here, even if it is hard to do, like, oh man, the opt-out creates all these, it creates all these difficulties. It's such a burden for us. The question is, who should bear the burden? The government or the citizen? Is the First Amendment designed to protect the citizens from government, or is it designed to protect the government from citizens? And this is the parents' lawyer who makes that important point. You're kind of inverting the idea of the Bill of Rights here.
Schools should not be treated differently than any other government entity as far as what their obligation is. And it somewhat flips the Bill of Rights on its head if we're worried more about extreme examples that don't happen to protect the government from the parents as opposed to protecting the parents' fundamental rights to direct the religious upbringing of their children.
Yeah, man, imagine the government burdened so much by the rights of the people. Some would say that's the point. We want the government to be burdened. We want the government to be limited. We want some things to be completely off limits to the government. A burdened government is much better than a burdened you. So go ahead and take that burden, Montgomery County School District.
Yeah, besides, the government can't even claim it doesn't have the resources. The government could say, well, so many parents are opting out, so we're increasing property taxes. And yeah, that would suck. But if this is truly the problem, if they're like, we do not have the resources for this, they can fix that and no one can say no because you can't not pay taxes. Like, okay, schools.
Yeah, they get to once again point their gun at you and put you in jail if you don't pay up to have your kid get forcibly read the story about the gay wedding. Okay, so that's the practicality argument. I mentioned there's kind of this the better argument that this isn't coercion, it's mere exposure. It's presenting ideas neutrally. Okay, that's the second argument for the government here. They're not endorsing homosexuality or gay marriage or transgenderism. They're just presenting ideas. And if it's just considering an idea and not telling students what to think about it, then this is much more First Amendment square. The thing I don't like about that argument is it assumes that first graders are like critical thinkers who are going to evaluate an idea on neutral terms and consider side A and side B and come to a reasonable conclusion. No, I mean, at some level, when you're telling a first grader, hey, men marry men, there's an implicit value associated with that. That is to say, that's normal or that's good, even if you don't say it, because that's the way that the first grade mind works. So Alito challenged the school district lawyer on that point. Why are you guys pretending like you're not pushing a message? It's fine if you're allowed to have a perspective. You might have some constitutional constraints on that, but can we just be honest that you have a perspective that you're pushing, and can we cut this crap about like neutrally presenting an idea and we would never take a side? And listen to the lawyer in response. No, that story that you just read about gay marriage isn't about promoting gay marriage. It's actually about a niece who's having a hard time because she's sad that her gay uncle is getting gay married and won't have any more time for her. That's really the lesson that you're supposed to take away. Here's Alito and the school district lawyer.
Bobby and Jamie love each other, said Mummy. When grown-up people love each other that much, sometimes they get married. I mean, that's not subtly sending a message this is a good thing.
I think that's a way of a mother consoling her daughter who's annoyed that her favorite uncle is distracted and doesn't have time for her. Just as in the 99 of the 100 books that we read about couples, it's a man and a woman, there also may be a man and a man.
I mean, why is the Montgomery County Board of Education in this argument running away from what they clearly want to say? They have a view that they want to express on these subjects. And maybe it's a very good view, but they have a definite view, and that's the whole point of this curriculum, is it not?
I'm not running away from anything the board has used to defend this. I think what's in the record is that the board wants to teach civility and respect for difference in the classroom.
Which is why they're presenting the opinion that gay marriage is a sin right alongside it. They want to promote respect for that view as well.
Of course.
Now you mentioned that part of the record at the appellate court was the fact that there are all these. I heard them talk about this during the arguments. The school district had provided teachers with a series of talking points for possible questions students might ask about this material, and those clearly take a strong stance on the value of these things.
Yes. So, and these are part of the record. The Court of Appeals mentions them, so they must also have been part of the trial court record. Here are some of the questions, or the teachers were provided with answers for potential questions, some from the students and some from the parents. Here are some examples. What if the student says, quote, "Being gay is wrong and not allowed in my religion"? Then the teacher can respond, "I understand that is what you believe, but not everyone believes that. We don't have to understand or support a person's identity to treat them with respect and kindness." What if somebody says a girl can only like boys because she's a girl? The teacher can disrupt her or the person asking and say,
it says disrupt?
Yes, that's the word.
That's not your word. That's taken from you should disrupt that student?
Sorry, the way that it's phrased, the teacher can disrupt the either or thinking by saying, that's how it's phrased, it's weird. The teacher can disrupt the either or thinking by saying something like, actually, people of any gender can like whoever they like. How do you think it would make you feel, how do you think it would make the character in the story feel to hear you say that? Do you think it's fair for people to decide for us who we can and can't like?
That's a big game, man.
Then the next one is, what if somebody asks what it means to be transgender? The teacher should explain. When we're born, people make a guess about our gender and label us boy or girl.
People make a guess? Based on what do they guess?
Literally a quote. People make a guess about our gender and label us boy or girl based on our body parts. Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. Our body parts do not decide our gender. Our gender comes from our inside.
Okay.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
This is from the parents.
I'm getting like secondhand parental rage, and my kid's not even in this district.
I'm thinking of you going to like the pediatrician or whatever.
Yeah, I kind of had that experience there, but I have the opt-out at the pediatrician. I just walk away and never go back. If it's my kid's school and I can't homeschool and I can't do private school, then yeah, I'm in trouble.
The last guidance is about parents. And what if a parent says that elementary age children are too young to be learning about gender and sexual identity, those bigots? The teacher should respond by observing that children are already learning about it because messages about gender are everywhere. And that beginning these conversations in elementary school will help young people develop empathy for a diverse group of people and learn about identities that might relate to their families or even themselves.
Yes, because society is so degenerate, they're going to be exposed to degeneracy, so why not more degeneracy? Thank you.
That's exactly. Yep.
These people. That's the thing. Even if I follow their reasoning, the question is, Who holds the right to introduce these ideas? And I'm sorry, if you believe that schools should be introducing sexual topics to first and second graders instead of just reading, writing, and arithmetic, you are a bizarre degenerate with no respect for the parent-child relationship of other people. And something's wrong with your brain. Like, if you want this level of control of other people's kids, something's wrong. I can't trust you. You're a weird child snatcher of some kind. I don't know what to call you, but something's wrong with you.
100%. I mean, if a teacher told me, well, the kids are the kids are learning about this anyway, so it would be, yes, at home, they're learning that a man likes a woman and a woman likes a man, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they're...
Yeah. Okay. So clear to Alito's point, the school is putting out coaching tips for how to respond to challenging questions. They clearly have a perspective, and the school's going to say, well, just like the books themselves, the teachers aren't required to use the talking points. They're just points of assistance. They are aids for the teachers, and they could use them or they could not. But even if I grant that, I notice the suggested talking points from the school are universally of one perspective. They don't say, if you wish to express perspective A, use talking points X, Y, and Z. However, if you prefer perspective B, try, 1, 2, 3. Did you see anything in in their talking points that maybe was something other than homos are awesome and when the doctor sees your boy's penis, it doesn't mean he's a boy?
Yeah, he can make an educated guess from the penis.
Okay.
But no, I did not see anything that prompted a teacher to say, correct, homosexuality is wrong, but I just want you to know that this is out there in the world.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah. None of those talking points. Okay. So Alito asks the lawyer for the district, well, okay, you have these parents who object. What are they supposed to do? Is it just tough for them? Too bad? Like, if I'm a parent who sends my kid to this school, I can't afford private school, I can't homeschool, what am I supposed to do? And the lawyer says, well, that's the way democracy works. This was democratically decided.
Some of the plaintiffs are devout Muslims. They say, we have a solemn religious obligation to raise our children as Muslims, and that involves certain moral principles that we want to instill in our children, and this school is teaching our children moral principles that are in conflict with ours. And we pay taxes to support the public schools, but we don't have enough money to send our children to private schools, and one of us can't stay home and provide homeschooling. We just want to be able to take our children out of the part of the instruction that we find objectionable. Your response to that is just, well, it's too bad, all right?
The school board here is democratically elected. The entire process of adopting this curriculum is open and transparent. There's plenty of opportunity for parental insight.
The problem is, that's the nature of rights as constitutionally protected. They aren't subject to a vote. The whole point of this review is that you can't just vote away people's rights. And Kavanaugh explained that idea, and then the lawyer agreed.
And you've mentioned a few times that the school board was democratically elected, democratically controlled, but that can't be the end of it, right?
Absolutely not. No, and I didn't mean
liberty. We're here to protect the liberty in the Constitution from the democratic excess.
Absolutely.
So he agrees that your rights can't be voted away. He just doesn't think that you have a right to opt your children out of hearing the gay wedding stories in first grade.
Indeed. Exposure can never violate your rights. It's like, sure, sir, sure.
He sounds like exposure has violated his rights a few times, if you know what I mean, but I'm just guessing. Anyway.
I would pay money to see these people make the same argument if, let's say, some of the books in school, they were about little Nazi kids who they want to grow up to kill the Jews. And for them to make the exact same argument and say, look, we're just exposing children to these other mid 20th century philosophies, like
Hitler, baby.
But really, I mean, that is what they're saying. They're saying if you had that exact scenario, hey, your child is just being exposed.
Yeah, it's just a thought that's out there. Like, maybe some races shouldn't exist.
Indeed.
I'm not saying like that's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm just like, I don't know. I take your point that clearly there are ideas that are of such moral weight and such complexity that they're just not age appropriate. And sexuality is one of those. And the idea that like, well, you know, who's to say what's a good idea for a first grader? They need base level skills and concepts before they can understand and tackle these high level concepts. Sexuality being one of them, especially the deeper layers of it of like, well, some people think this or believe that or do this behavior or that behavior. The idea of anybody first introducing those concepts to my kids before my wife and me is just enraging. And I can't imagine what these parents are going through, because you either have to upend your entire life and I guess somehow figure out a way to put your kids in private school or reorganize your employment situation so you can homeschool them. But yeah, like my children will learn about those concepts from us as parents. And I don't, even if another person agrees with us in full on principle, I do not like the idea of that person having control of the introduction of that concept to my children. And this guy's like, these lawyers in the school district, the lawyer for the school district is just like, well, you know, it's just an idea, man. It's like 2 + 2 = 4, you know, and just give it to the kids and see what they do with it. Ugh.
Yeah. It contradicts everything we know about children. I mean, children do take what they see as normative. You know, what your kids see you doing every day in their minds just becomes normal. It's like, that's good. That's right. That's what you do. And so kids pick up all sorts of good and bad habits, right? I mean, if a kid is exposed to bad things, they will be considered normative and the kid will probably repeat them.
Exactly.
And
yeah, I think about that all the time. It's like, I don't sit down. I mean, obviously I tell my sons like, hey, this is good behavior and that this is bad behavior, but modeling that behavior for them is every bit, if not more so important, because they'll just do what you do. And if I start telling them like, yeah, you know, mom and dad are married, but that's like no different than 2 dads being married or like 5 dads, or it's just a thing. Like there's no value assigned to it. If I start doing it even value neutral to them, they will inherently accept value concepts like, well, A and B are actually the same. I mean, that's a value judgment. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And as adults, we can do that, right? Like we can see a situation and then decide for ourselves if it's right or wrong. A child is not generally able to do that. They see a situation and they just kind of assume this is how it is. And it is much later in life that they start kind of looking back and going, oh, wow, that wasn't right, you know, or whatever. And so this idea that exposure is not somehow actually not perhaps forcing, but affecting the beliefs of a child.
Yeah,
it's just disingenuous. And like, we all know this. I wish, I don't know. Here's where sometimes I get frustrated with the court, because like that's the elephant in the room, but nobody will come out and say it and be like, look, we're all people, we know kids. This is affecting them. Let's quit pretending that it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have a few more points on this, and to our callers, I will get to you soon. I appreciate you being patient with, a longer than usual stream tonight, just because I found this hearing to be so fascinating, but I want to get through it. Where this lawyer really got tied up, I think, in his own nonsense. Now, you were telling me there maybe is an explanation for what he's trying to say here, so we'll listen to the clip and you decide. But there was this comparison to depictions of or drawings of the Prophet Muhammad. So my understanding is the same school district allows parents to opt out of seeing any depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, of course, to accommodate Muslim religious beliefs and to avoid violating them. So Gorsuch is asking, well, how is that any different? If it's perfectly possible from a practical perspective for this school to accommodate that opt-out for Muslim parents, and those Muslim parents have a First Amendment right to that opt-out, how is it that they don't have the same right to opt out of these gay stories? And I try to follow the lawyer's explanation for what he says is the difference. Robert might have a better understanding than is immediately available.
How does that play out in the case of the Muhammad image for a Muslim student?
Assuming that the prohibition is on viewing a visual depiction of the Prophet Muhammad, in those circumstances, the school is coercing an individual to act contrary to a religious belief.
Even though just being exposed to the image?
The
exposure there is coercion in your view?
I think it's the difference between exposure to ideas and activity that coerces you to engage in conduct that is in violation of your beliefs.
So when the idea is the image of the Prophet.
I think the image is the image. In other words, if there were a book.
So it's an image that makes the difference rather than an idea?
I think it's conduct that makes the difference, and I think this is an important distinction. So if there were a book that described someone drawing an image of the Prophet Muhammad, I don't think a parent would have the ability to object, even given the religious prohibition at issue, on simply being exposed to the idea that people might depict the image of the Prophet Muhammad. Being required to view the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad in contravention of a religious objection is being required to engage in conduct.
Well, the child is sitting passively and the teacher's just reading a storybook.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
Make sense of that to me. Seeing a drawing of Muhammad is conduct, but hearing a story about a gay wedding is some kind of passive behavior that is different from a First Amendment protection standpoint. How? Why?
Well, the very act of viewing an image of Muhammad is prohibited by Islam. And so it is not being told about somebody seeing an image of Muhammad. That would not be protected. What is protected is the actual action of viewing the image. And so then the child would be a constitutional right because it has gone from exposure over to action. Much like, kind of like we do with free speech, we say sometimes speech itself is an action, and so it's no longer protected. Like if I'm real close to you and I go, I'm gonna freaking kill you or whatever. At that point, we say, well, that speech really was an action. And that's the case the lawyer's making. And frankly, I think he will succeed on that distinction. I know that's wild.
What the dude, to me, that was just, maybe this is one of those areas where if you understand all the specific legal hair splitting, it makes sense. I'm not familiar with that area of First Amendment case law. So to me and my layman brain, that is pure nonsense. That is just absolute gobbledygook. I have no idea what you're talking about when you say that viewing a picture is an action in a way that hearing a story is not. But okay, I'll take your word for it because I could talk about that for another half hour. He must know something I don't. But if you think that lawyer is tough to listen to, he's definitely more coherent than some of the Supreme Court justices, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. We have Sotomayor, who is still alive, apparently, I guess, although she talks like maybe she's on the Biden train too, although Biden's still alive too, so maybe I should give these people more credit. Anyway, you also have Jumanji Brown Jackson as well. And of course, it's not enough for Sonia Sotomayor to make totally insane points, which she does. She has to constantly interrupt this lawyer for the parents while she's doing it. She is acting like she's some kind of aggressive prosecutor, taking apart the defense's witness on cross or something like that. She is just going after this guy from a pure advocacy perspective. And I get it, like these Supreme Court justices have a stance on the issue and they might lead a lawyer to make an argument that they find to be compelling. They're often behaving rhetorically rather than like just pure teach me about this issue type curiosity. But with almost every other justice, they allow the lawyer to make the points. She asks him questions. She gives him about 3 words to respond before she just makes up another one. And then she demands that he answer her questions, even though she will not allow him to do it. Let's see if we can make it through this clip.
What you're saying is that the exposure of children to the fact that 2 people are getting married is coercion? That 2 people of the same sex are getting married is coercion?
So our clients have not raised that objection. I suppose someone could raise that.
But let's talk about what in the portrayals so that the mere reading or looking at the pictures, like looking at an image of Muhammad, would be coercion? Is looking at two men getting married, is that the religious objection?
Again, it would depend on the individual beliefs of the clients. So, for example, many parents would object to their child being exposed to something like pornography or extreme violence. It would vary.
We're not going there. Just answer my question. Is looking at the pictures, is there any affidavit from any parent that merely looking at people getting married, holding hands, none of them are even kissing in any of these books, the most they're doing is holding hands, that mere exposure to that is coercion?
Our parents would object to that. They follow.
All right, now, so let's move to what I think your objection is. I think your objection is to the student guidance, correct?
Our objections would be even to reading books that violate our clients' religious beliefs.
Shut up, bitch! Oh my God!
All right, let me characterize your position for you. Good God. Now, he did start making the point that you were talking about. Like, okay, well, they might object to pornography. And I'd be curious to hear, based on your framework, on, like, would they have any valid basis to object to a pornographic presentation in the classroom? No, shut up. Here's your position. I'll articulate it for you.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you know, what's wild is what she's saying there is the parent must demonstrate that they have a religious objection to viewing this image, just like a Muslim has this objection to viewing an image of Muhammad. So it is just such an obtuse view of somebody's religion. It's like, well, yeah, religiously, I'm opposed to, say, gay marriage, but because I don't oppose particularly an image of gay marriage, then I have no constitutional rights. Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jumanji Brown Jackson was just as bad with the interruptions, but her exchange, I think, was even funnier because I think she thought she had a gotcha, but she's actually making a great point. It's like one of those memes with a screaming person trying to make a point to the Chad guy, and he's just saying yes. That's kind of what happened here. She asks the parents' lawyer if the parents oppose like just the gay stuff in books. Do you oppose just a story? Or do you oppose gay stuff anywhere in school? Like, would you parents oppose a gay teacher sharing gay wedding photos or talking about her gay wedding? Would you oppose that? And the answer that she gives is, yeah, because that's totally inappropriate for the venue. You're a teacher. This is an English class. This is not show and tell. So what are you doing?
Is your argument actually confined to the content of the school's curriculum? What if we have a teacher who is gay and has a photo of a wedding on her desk? Is a parent able, or could they opt out of having their student be in that classroom?
Well, we think no, because the student, the student may claim a burden on the question of the student doesn't have the right to tell a teacher what to say. The teacher has speech rights. That would
but I guess I don't understand that given your argument. Example one, we have a gay teacher in the classroom and they have a wedding photo on their desk, and the children are exposed then to the same kinds of picture that you say is in the book that you don't want children to be exposed to. What about the parent, the teacher showing pictures from the wedding, or the teacher goes off to get married and comes back and talks about their spouse? Do we have opt-out provisions for children in that situation?
Again, we think the same rules would apply, and if you were in a system...
The same rules would apply. So this is not just about books. This is about exposure to people of different sexual orientations and the objection, the sincerely held objection, that children shouldn't be exposed to this.
Bingo.
Yes, it is about exposure to sexual topics in the inappropriate venue of a school to the inappropriate audience of children. You got it. You think you owned everybody? Oh, I got them now. Look at the corner I put them in. Yes, it's weird for a gay teacher. I don't even have to make it gay, okay? If my first grader's teacher comes and shows my kid pictures from her bachelorette party or something like that, bitch, what are you doing? That is not, your job is to teach him to read grade level stories, not show photos of whatever lifestyle you have after hours. So you don't even have to make it a gay thing. Like, Ketanji Brown Jackson, do you think it's normal for teachers to use grade school classrooms for personal show and tell? What is your view of the purpose of the classroom? Anyway.
Yes. I feel like I mean, we're talking about like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Like these people have no limits. And I get that, like, essentially the argument she's trying to make is like, well, I mean, this is implied. She doesn't say it, but it's like, so a heterosexual person could have a wedding picture on their desk, but the gay person couldn't. And it's like, well, there's a very good reason for that double standard. There's nobody in the world who opposes heterosexual marriage. No one. So technically, yes, you know what? Some kid could opt out of the class with the heterosexual marriage photo.
It might be the
But no one
Democrat
will.
Party platform in like 10 years that they oppose heterosexual marriage. So just wait. But yes, I'll grant your point.
But you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, technically both photos could be a problem. The reality of the matter is that nobody's going to opt out of the non-gay photo. And I'm sorry, if people want to opt out of the gay photo, that's the whole point. They have the constitutional right to do so.
Yeah, if you are entering the field of teaching to use your teaching desk as a personal display of your personal life, yeah, I mean, okay. If you are unusual in your life, it's going to be a bigger problem than if you're a totally normal person who does not violate norms in any way. But to me, it's like, no matter who you are or what your purposes are, if that's the reason you're entering the field and it's a necessary component of your profession, why? Is this about teaching the kids, or is it about you projecting your view onto them? And again, like raising the next generation of other people's kids to believe your worldview, your ideology. If that's what you want, I have a suggestion. Have your own damn kids and teach them whatever the hell you want, but stop trying to hijack other people's kids in that way. But anyway, one last piece of Sotomayor-based comedy. At least I think it's funny. I didn't see this story a few years ago, given Sotomayor's interruptions that we just heard. She has historically complained about being interrupted herself on the Supreme Court. In 2021, she successfully lobbied for a change in the rules, in the structure of these oral arguments, because she submitted studies that confirmed that women on the court, herself included, have been interrupted more than men. So the rules were changed to allow the justices to ask questions individually in the order of seniority.
The American people are tired of women.
That lady changed the Supreme Court rules because she thinks she is interrupted more than other people interrupt her. And I guess the Chief Justice or whoever the policymaker is bought it. I want to see this study that confirmed what she's saying.
And I love that she just jumped to one of at least two potential conclusions. Like the conclusion is, well, women are interrupted more because sexism or something. But there's another potential conclusion. Maybe women are interrupted more because they're less clear. And so the lawyer has to ask a question midstream to get clarification. That's just as plausible. So how about we make a new rule and we say, women, be more clear.
Yeah, that would follow. And actually, I think it's the more plausible if we accept her premise that the interruptions are more common. Bitch, I have no idea what you're talking about is that's the more believable explanation. And I guess they're not even mutually exclusive. It could be that and sexism combined. I suppose in my case, it actually is. You got me, Sonia. When you make a point, you got to point. Just like Jumanji Brown Jackson, you got me. I don't think you should be showing gay wedding photos to first graders when the teacher comes back from her gay wedding over the weekend. Anyway, really quick, just to wrap this up, like where is this going to go? Based on the argument, it really sounds like you're going to get some kind of opt-out framework from the Supreme Court about free exercise and about the rights of parents where these topics are presented. If there is some sort of hiccup in that, I think it's going to be on the point that you raised about the procedural rules here and whether the injury was actually suffered. But I don't want to put your words in your mouth. That's how I see it. Do you see this ending up any differently when the case, I guess we'll get a decision. What is this one coming out in like June? I don't know. Presumably it is.
Yeah. I think it sounds like the conservatives will win this one, but I think it will be extremely narrowly tailored. And I do think that they're going to make a qualitative distinction either about the age of the children or the unusual character of sex itself. Like, I think the decision will be restricted essentially to conversations about sex to young children, and it will go no further.
That'll be interesting as far as I'm aware. Well, I mean, the Supreme Court has formulated different rules for different types of content. Like we famously have the ambiguity in the obscenity doctrine. And who was it? Potter Stewart and the pornography thing. Like, I know it when I see it. You've had these sort of frustratingly ambiguous definitions of separate categories of content that even if the definition offered isn't really satisfying, everybody kind of knows it to be true. Maybe this falls into that. Like, hey, weirdos, stop talking about sex to kids. All right. I'm not going to make it any more technical than that. People have a First Amendment right not to participate in that nonsense if they don't want to. It'd be funny to just issue the opinion by tweet like that. Just do it that way.
Yeah, just like tweet, don't be a pedo, period.
Well, if Robert can't be Pope, he could be, I have no doubt Robert would be a better Supreme Court justice than at least 2 or 3 of them on the bench. So here's hoping. All right. You all set up in Discord, get yourself unmuted in there, and we'll take a few calls. To our super chatters, I'll get to you when we're done with 3 calls here, and then we'll call it a night. But let's see what Golden Leaf has to say. Golden Leaf, are you there?
Good evening, gentlemen. How are y'all doing today?
We are well. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no problem. I was listening in, and dear God, I don't want to get into women.
Oh, please do.
As a famous friend of mine once said, we talked a lot about women's rights. Let's talk about women's wrongs.
One list is longer than the other. Yeah.
Yes. And so I actually want to get your thought on this. I saw this one day, and I'm thinking, I wonder how Matt would think about this. So you know how we have a sex offender registry?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be possible? Probably not, but also have a registered false rape accuser registry.
Or just treat it as like a sex offender. I suppose maybe it would be unfair to call them sex offenders in the same way like a pedophile is, but...
False reporter?
Yeah. Are you just asking would I support that as a policy?
Yes.
Without thinking it through in a detailed level, sure. In general, I would favor harsher penalties for false accusers in many different contexts. Certainly in the sexual context, because it's so damaging and defamatory to a person to be labeled a rapist or to be labeled some kind of sexual abuser. But in the context of all these hoax hate crimes, now, maybe those shouldn't be punished as severely, but I'm so tired of these false I'm not tired of it, actually. I've built my business on it. So please keep making more hoax hate crimes. But like,
Matt
just
needs his money.
from a justice perspective, yeah, I hate that all these accusations are just thrown out that like a specific guy is a racist or a ghost that nobody's ever found out there is a racist. I know you can't do it for cases that aren't ever proven to be hoaxes, but the ones that are, we need serious punishment. And I suppose that being on a list is really just like a formal method of public shaming than anything else. It's
we do need to bring back, I think public shaming needs to be brought out to where you are ostracized for your community. And even if you say, oh, I'll just move to another community, word will spread, honey, and people will look at you like you are a horrible person. Like, why'd you do this? You ruined this person's life.
The only limitation I would offer is I would want that list has to come with its own due process, right? Like if you are convicted of false police report,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't want them themselves falsely accused. But harsher punishment for people who falsely accuse. I'm all in favor of. It's way too common.
All right, so I'll finish off with a joke since my time is up. So a black man with a parrot walks into a bar, and the bartender, looking surprised, says, "Wow, that is the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. Where'd you get him?" said the bartender. "Africa," said the parrot.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. I don't know if you earned the rim shot, but you earned a boo.
Thank you. I guess. Right. I'll go back to my dad jokes later, but have a good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Get the hell out of here.
Robert, that's kind of a legal topic that maybe you have some opinions on. What do you think about registry for false accusers?
Yeah, I don't hate it. Of course, there's always this opposing interest of we don't want to discourage accusers. Normally, somebody making an accusation, particularly of the sexual nature, is a less powerful person in the relationship. They're less wealthy, they're less well connected, or whatever the case may be. So if now this person also feels like the accusation may turn on them and they might end up on a list, it might keep them from bringing the accusation even when it's legitimate. However, like you're saying,
truth and unprovability would always be a defense. Like truth is a defense. Kill shot, I can prove it. Even if it's just ambiguous and questionable, you're never going to get convicted for a false report unless it's provably false. So
with caveat, yeah, I think that would be fine. With that provably false standard, like it has to be also like beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be like a crime in itself.
Yeah.
And then I would be all about it.
And a lot of them are. I think of one of the most interesting interviews I've heard recently. I forget when it came out, like late last year, but do you remember the Duke Lacrosse accuser? Yeah. And she's in prison for something else. That's right. It's not for accusing, even though she kind of ruined those guys with that false rape accusation. Then what did she steal? Or she did something later in life. But now she's in prison and has totally, she claims that she's seen the light, that she's changed her ways, that she regrets her past. And she talks about the role and influence of Jesus on her life now. And when I heard her talk about that, I believe her. It's one of those things where it's like, you definitely were a liar in the past, but I believe you that you are speaking with your full conviction right now. And it was a very interesting interview because I felt like an idiot for believing this lady who's a proven liar. But at the same time, like, people have to be able to reform. People have to be able to find something and do something better. And I think that she has, at least I hope that she has. It was really interesting interview that came out.
Absolutely. What I would like to see is more consequences on people who repeat the accusations or take actions based on the accusations when they end up being false. Because that really doesn't happen. Like, for example, let's say a young man is accused of rape, like at a university level. He may very well be expelled before the accusation is ever settled in a criminal court, particularly. Well, you know what? If that guy wins his case, he should be able to sue that university for all it's worth. Like, that university is acting before there's true due process. And I know that universities kind of have their own process they go through, but it is not rigorous. And so people suffer consequences before anything is ever proven. And I think that is patently unfair.
Let's talk to Turles. Turles, go ahead.
Hey, hello. Well,
what do you got for us?
Yeah, good to see you again. Well, I'm glad we're talking about the idea of religious liberty today, because I wanted to talk a little bit about another book. This time it's John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. Have you heard of that?
I have not. Do you know that one, Robert?
Yeah, it's a classic. Yep.
Oh, of course, Robert knows.
Very well read.
But,
yeah.
It's extremely good, and I thought I would recommend to you an abridged version that's illustrated. That one goes by the title "Dangerous Journey," illustrated by Alan Perry. So, "Dangerous Journey," very good. Get it for your boys; they will love it. The illustrations are really top notch. And you know,
what kind of illustrations in the context of tonight's discussion? I have to ask.
Right? Nothing like that. I can tell you. It is a little gritty, I will admit, because the Pilgrim's Progress is basically an allegorical story. It paints the Christian life as kind of like a fantasy epic almost, and so it's really cool. Yeah, you should check it out. And John Bunyan, the guy who wrote it, led a very interesting life. He was born about 8 years after the Pilgrims made their journey to America. And he kind of represents what happened to the kinds of people who stayed, who the Pilgrims come out of like a similar tradition as the Puritans. They aren't exactly Puritans, but they're kind of similar. The British crown wanted conformity, religious conformity in his country, and so the Baptists and Puritans were sometimes persecuted, and so John Bunyan was a preacher in Britain at the time who he spent about 12 years in prison for preaching the wrong way, basically. And so he started writing the Pilgrim's Progress while he was in prison. And it's a long and difficult kind of read by today's standards because of sort of old-timey language, but that's why I recommend the illustrated abridged version to at least get familiar with it. It's really engaging.
All right. Well, thank you for the recommendation and thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Robert, you have thoughts on that book?
No, full recommend. Yeah, it's a classic, and I think most people should read it. It is one of the most sold Christian books. Somebody should fact check me on that, but I think it's up there.
All right, last call tonight is going to go to 88M. Are you there?
Yes, good evening.
What do you got for us?
Well, I'm here to talk about the new Army fitness test that they just rolled out the past couple of days.
Oh, is this a Hegseth product, or I hadn't heard of this, so what's the deal with it? Okay.
Yes, Hegseth a month ago sent a memo out to all the branches saying for men and women to meet the same physical requirement standards in combat roles.
Mm-hmm.
So the Army said, okay, we got this. Not really, but we'll try. And so they came out with the Army Fitness Test, which is a copy of the Army Combat Fitness Test.
Okay, so this is something they brought back something old, or when you say copy of, was it something current or was it something former?
It was something current. They just changed from 6 events to 5 events. They got rid of the power standing throw, which is you throw a 10-pound measure ball over your head for a distance, which is like, so that makes combat. I can throw a 10-pound ball over my head. I'm combat ready.
Okay, and so the new rule will be that the performance standards for combat roles will be the same for men and women, period. And but how does this compare to combat fitness standards of old, where the issue of women in combat was a lot, it was not really a thing. Let's put it that. Have they lowered the standard, or is the standard about where it was historically? Is my question.
Well, if you say 10 push-ups is lowering the standard, then
I don't know what the benchmark was before. So did they?
Before it was 42 push-ups for males in the age of 17 to 21.
And we've lowered it to 10?
Yes.
That's a problem.
To pass.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Or you wanted to do a 22 2-mile.
22 minutes 2-mile?
Yes.
Dude, that's like power walk. Okay. Yeah, we got a problem then. And that's not with with equipment or gear. That's just like you in your shorts and your running shoes on a track 2-mile.
Yes.
Okay. So really, when we say we're making when we say we're making standards equal, if what you're saying is correct, we're really reducing standards from where they were historically. Fair to say.
Oh yes, definitely. Because when the OPT test that this one is replacing, the Army Combat Fitness Test, when it first rolled out, 84% of females were failing it.
Yeah, well, sorry. That's the way it's going to work out. It's okay. So this is designed with the intent. Do they have numbers? I guess if this is a new policy, we don't necessarily have numbers on X% female success rate yet, but it's going to be better than 15% success or whatever it was before.
Well, in theory, or they'll just try to lower the standards again, because that's what they've been doing the past 5 years.
Until there are no standards, just anybody
There are no standards.
If you
just show
believe
up
in yourself, you can have a combat role. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, I hadn't heard anything about that. If what you're saying is true, then that's not really improvement in any way. That a lowered bar is not a better bar insofar as it's equal for the genders. You want capable, strong guys who are able to handle these combat roles. Not like this. Still, in a way, is kind of the social engineering stuff. Like this standard sounds like it was set to achieve a certain level of gender equity just through a different mechanism or a different benchmark.
Oh, definitely. It's like, to be fair to females, but it's not fair to males because, for me to get promoted, I had to have a good PT score, but females had to do less push-ups. So how that fair to get the same job?
You think the bell curve on this is going to be crazy? Like if the guys are going to dominate, like every guy is going to be athletically elite, and then you're going to have a bunch of women who are more like the mean,
Yeah.
It's not going to. It's going to be nonsense.
It is nonsense. Like the new standards haven't been released, but to be in a combat position, you have to meet a minimum for each event of 60 points.
Okay.
But if they keep the same 60 points, that's 10 push-ups. That's a 22 2-mile. For males, that's a 140-pound deadlift.
How many? It's one lift or how many reps?
3 reps.
Okay. All right. Well, this is all news to me, so I'll take your word for it. I haven't heard anything about this, but if it's as you're describing, I question whether this is an improvement from what we had before. But
the funny part with this test is like if you look at the other branches, like the Navy has a higher standard of PT than the Army does, which is like we're losing to the Navy.
Hey, I don't get involved in inter-branch conflicts. As a guy who was not in myself, I have respect for all the branches. I'm like a Maryland school district. I'm neutral on the judgment value here. But yes, if you want to take pride over the Navy, that's you're welcome to do that. But I got to let you go. Is there anything else you want to say before you're out of here?
No, I just wish the military could be strong again.
Yeah, would be nice. Thank you for the call.
Yep.
You have any women in combat thoughts, Robert?
I think it's a bad idea.
There you go. Let me put it this way. Over time, I've come around on this too. It's funny because back in the day, back in my blue pilled days, I used to have some conversations with my brother about this, and most people know the story of my brother, so I won't get into that. But this is like 2012, 2013. My brother's heard he's out of the Army, but this stuff's starting to happen under Obama, and he just such bullshit, man. And I used to be of the perspective like, well, if a woman can do it, then why not? I never wanted lower standards for women, but I thought if the standard is X, why should we care if a woman or a man meets it? Now, over time, I've come around to the truth of the matter, at least as I see it. Men and women are different. And even if a woman is physically capable of the task, there are an exceptional few who may be. The dynamic between men and women is still different. You are still putting men in a different position when they have a woman in their unit. The interaction will be different. The performance of the group will be different. And the Marine Corps studied this in 2015. They tried mixed gender unit combat simulations. Invariably, the mixed gender units performed more poorly. They had more injuries. They were slower. They required a lot of the females in the groups required assistance to perform tasks that the men could do. I know people like to make this like a female discrimination or a female disrespect issue. It's not. In fact, I think there's something deranged, not just disrespectful, but deranged about sending women to combat roles to go fight and die in a way that men do. The whole point of men going and fighting and dying is to shield and protect women from that because we respect their role It's not like, oh, I hate women, so I'm keeping them out of here. No, respect the hell out of women. Love the mother of my children. Don't want her to experience terrible things. If I have to go into a trench to fight off bad guys, to stop the bad guys from getting to them, that's what I'll do. I hope I don't have to. But it's weird to me that it's like discriminatory to think that women don't belong in a diseased, gory, horrific trench with, tough guys who can handle that situation.
I fully agree. And the idea that men are going to treat women the same in a combat situation as they would treat other men is just ludicrous. Like, you have this idea of they're all soldiers, and of course they're like brothers, and they're going to try to help one another to the extent that they can. But in war, you have these very difficult situations where like people, like you just have to like kind of let go of somebody and be like, they're going on this super dangerous mission and like maybe they won't make it back. And in those situations, especially if you're making like split-second decisions, you're not going to treat a woman the way you would treat a man. Like,
yeah, it's there's something instinctive about it. Instinctive, whatever the word is. Yeah.
Yes, there is. And also, and I don't know if this is like off color to point out, but there's also the whole like kind of sexual tension dynamic.
Yeah,
that
totally.
The whole point is it shouldn't be there. And I don't know if this is too edgy to say, but I think this is why the whole like, even the don't ask, don't tell policy was quite wise. Like, you shouldn't know which dudes are willing to bang you. Like, you just shouldn't.
Yeah, like there's a in addition to a privacy issue for the potential tellers, there's kind of a performance issue for the unit. Yeah.
Yes, like the whole point is in this setting there should be no sexual element. You are a bunch of men that are there for a mission, and any kind of sexual element ruins the dynamic that you should have.
And it's just dangerous too. It's like you put a bunch of guys hopped up on adrenaline. They're all 18, 19, 20 years old. They're in a high stress situation, and you've got some chick just like hanging out with them. Now, yes, men should be able to control their urges. Yes, you shouldn't just, you shouldn't succumb to every thought that enters your head. I get it. But there's just a certain reality that when you mix young men in high stress situations who need a relief and like a chick, any chick, guess what's going to happen? That's how the world continues, It's like we have this wisdom with young kids, like, well, maybe we shouldn't mix the boys and the girls at the play date because one of them might end up under the table and, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Yeah, works the same way in the Army or the Marine Corps or anywhere else. That's how it's going to work out. And maybe it's isolated. Maybe it's not everyone, but you only need like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those cases before the whole situation is really screwed up. So, yeah. Anyway, all right, I just got Super Chat, and I know you've been here for 2 hours, so I want to respect your time. If you don't want to stick around for Super Chat, just say the word, but it shouldn't be much more than 10, 15 minutes or so if you're interested in that.
Absolutely.
All right, over on Odyssey, I'll start on Odyssey because Blankets is always sending me funny memes. I'm not going to put them up on the screen, but, the Grim Reaper J.D. Vance knocking at the door for Pope Francis. There's something to it, man. Anyway, he says, what do you think of the RFK thinking? What do you think about RFK thinking about banning artificial dyes in the big foods in the next 2 years? Probably for the best. Now, I haven't read all the studies about like that these whether these dye, like how bad these dyes are for you. And I know I like to joke about how much I love my Skippy peanut butter, and please give me the hydrogenated oils, and some natural foods are to be rejected. And some of that's true, like, and some of that's just me trolling. But yeah, I'm trying to think of a negative, like a downside if we got rid of a lot of these artificial elements in our food. Cost, I suppose, like maybe some food items become more expensive, but are things really going to become more expensive because you don't put a particular dye in there so it doesn't appear to be a certain color?
I don't think so. They'll just be less pretty.
Our food is definitely screwed up, and I don't have a lot of faith in the wisdom of the government hand coming in and fixing it. It really comes down to consumer choices. Like, hey man, the food market's kind of screwed up because a lot of our choices are kind of screwed up. We go to the store and we buy like messed up stuff. I participate in it too. Like, ooh, a new weird flavor of whatever highly processed, snack. I got to try it. Yeah. If we were all smarter and we chose bags of spinach instead, there would be no market for these things. So I don't know. I guess I have some hesitation with the idea of like the government coming in and saving me from my own dietary choices. But whatever's gonna get us on a trajectory that's not as obese and sick as we currently are, I'm not going to complain about it. You have any hot red dye takes?
It's not one of those things that I've ever really worried about, but I am that guy that like over my life, like I've like made my own yogurt. I make my own pasta from scratch and sourdough and like all those things.
How do you have time? You've read like every book and you make your own meals from scratch. All right.
But so I was already not, I don't know. Wait, I'm not going to say I wasn't affected by food dyes. I love M&Ms, like peanut M&Ms are like S tier snack. But I think they'll taste the same without the food dye. Let's do it. Let's ban it.
All right. Big government is cool now that RFK is running the show. Hey, if we use big government to crack down on like the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry by extension, or like all right. If I'm going to try big government once, here's the context. Let's go for it. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Blankets. Appreciate it. Okay, hopping over to Rumble. JD 1492. Don't get your hopes up for any traditionalist Catholic pope. One of the guys in the running, Petro Parolin, negotiated with China to help appoint commie bishops. Yuval Noah Harari is next up at the WEF. Now, I don't know these names, and I'll take his point as true that you got some like pro-China commie guy in the running. But yeah, I don't know. I guess my question for you that you might know more than I do, as far as Francis's progressivism, is he at some of the deepest depths, or do they go far deeper in progressivism than Francis did?
Oh, I think it goes further, at least in the areas where he stood strong. There are quite a few in the Catholic Church who would like to see female priests. And in fact, I'm thinking of, I won't name him, but a particular Catholic influencer that is a priest himself who complains about that the church still has not opened that up for women. And so, yeah, I think if the Catholics keep getting progressive popes, they could go the way of the UMC, like I was saying, like the United Methodist Church or the some of the Presbyterians or whatever. They've kind of stood strong where many of the Protestant churches went really woke, and they need to be careful. That could happen.
Thank you, JD. Got some from our call screener, Dangerous Spaces. Were you Americans the same as us Aussies? It was weird seeing teachers out of school. For all we knew, teachers lived at school. You know why? They told us nothing about their private lives. Kinda. I mean, I had friendly relationships with my teachers growing up, but I definitely didn't know much about their home lives other than I went to school, like junior high and high school in a small town. So several of the teachers were married to each other, actually. That was the extent to which I knew like of any of their home lives. So yeah, I mean, did you ever have teachers doing this show and tell bit? No?
No, I mean, I knew, say, if they had kids, because they might mention them, like they might be like, well, my kid was doing this the other day and blah, 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 as part of some like illustration. But no, I never felt like a teacher was oversharing. There was one instance, and this is like, sorry, short story time with Robert, but where a teacher at my high school, now this was in Chile, he put a VHS in, the typical like TV with the VHS. He was the psychology professor, and porn started playing, and it was his porn. Like, and he immediately stopped it. Jeez. And warned the class to secrecy.
Oh, so he didn't even try to make up a story like, oh man, the Austin Powers, like how'd that get in there? He was just like, listen, you'll never speak of this.
Exactly, and it worked.
What?
He did. Yes, no one said a word.
Well, you did now, so you better hope he's dead. He's
Yeah.
coming for you. No, unironically.
Great story. compelling and rich.
I was not expecting it to go that direction. But, to tie up tonight's themes, you did not have a right to opt out. That was just the presentation of an idea in a value neutral way. And I mean, what case do you have that you have any business not seeing it?
Indeed.
Dangerous Spaces also says, speaking of surrogacy, there's a recent clip of Pete Buttigieg on his surrogacy experience. One thing he mentions is the deposit you pay for the child. So a down payment to purchase a human being. I only laugh because it's so horrific. Yeah, I mean, this is, I've talked about that stuff a lot, so I probably shouldn't go too deep into it. But yeah, what's wrong with the idea of surrogacy in that way? What's wrong with it is it's not just about the consent rights of the parents, as in like a sperm donor and an egg donor agree to implant that embryo in womb Y, and she consents to it. The issue is you're neglecting the rights of the child. The child has a right to a mother and a father. And of course, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Dad gets killed. Mom, something happens to her. Yes, there are families that are of non-traditional structures. But the point is, you don't intentionally create those families. You don't intentionally deprive the child of a father or a mother because that child has to be fit into your lifestyle. And that's not even like a unique knock on gay people. You don't do that to fit any lifestyle. You don't like rent out someone's womb because you don't want the inconvenience or the body damage that motherhood imposes on you. So you just like pass that off to someone else. All of this neglects the rights of the children. That's why it's wrong.
I fully
agree. Pushback? All right.
No, none at all. Yeah. No, I fully agree. I'll leave it at that.
Dangerous Spaces says, we are not pushing these things as a positive. We're just teaching kids to have respect. Fuck off. You don't teach kids to respect things if you think they're bad or evil. What a crock of shit. That's a fair point too. Why would I respect it without a value judgment? You wouldn't.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Nazi example, which, I mean, of course I'm using the cliche example, but it's like, I suppose that would be fine to have stories about like, little Nazi girl who has dreams about terrible things. And it's like, hey, it's just exposure.
Yeah. If all things are to be respected and tolerated, there is no good or bad. Like, this is a bizarre thing about the progressive moral framework, if there even is one. Like, tolerance and respect are not values for their own sake. It's a question of tolerance of what, respect for what, and those questions are answered by value judgments made according to moral truth. You don't automatically respect or tolerate anything. You wouldn't say it's good to tolerate serial killers. Well, that's just a lifestyle. Who are we to say it's just a way of living? No, it's not. It violates the inherent right to life. That's why it's wrong, and that's why you shouldn't tolerate it. I'm not saying that gay people are serial killers. I am saying there are moral truths to the world that we ought to observe, and according to that, you don't tolerate certain things. It doesn't mean I'm going to like stone the next gay person I see or something, but it does mean that I grant that there's a distinction between, say, the union of man and woman and the union of man and man. That distinction is one creates life. It creates the next generation. It is according to God's design, and the other is not. And I'm not advocating like the force of law to come down on people who disagree but to act like all lifestyles are inherently the same, and there's no judgment to be made, whatever. Like, we're living in a nonsense world then where you don't agree that right and wrong even exist because everything is to be tolerated. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Yep. And that's where I appreciate that Kavanaugh said that. He's like, why don't you just come out and say it? Like, just say what you really...
Alito. Yeah.
Alito. Oh, sorry, Alito.
Yeah.
Where Alito was like, just say it. It's clear. It would be easier to have the conversation if you outright said, we want all kids to be okay with being gay.
Dangerous Spaces question, how are American children tracking in reading, writing, and arithmetic? If those areas need improvement, let's spend more of that time taking up with the gay commie propaganda BS. Well, it's because they're not tolerant enough. If they were just more tolerant, they would understand math concepts better. Also says J.D. Vance visits the Pope once, and the Pope dies. He visits various media outlets several times, and every single one of them is still with us. And many of them are already slowly dying. I mean, what the hell? I don't know. Does he have is there a term for like the Midas touch of death? Maybe just kiss of death? I don't know. Like whatever J.D. Vance, he just touches things and they die. Maybe. I don't know. Laughing Boy, when I found out my teacher was gay? When I saw her at a non-school function. I saw pictures on her desk of her girlfriend, but she never said who was in the picture other than my friend, blah, blah, blah. And that's true too. Like, just because you see a photo of your teacher with another female, who is that, her sister? Is that her good friend? You have no idea unless it's explained to you. So yeah, like without the show, how would these parents or kids even know who that is to opt out of anyway? Unless the teacher makes a point of it. But they have to make a point of it. They always do. All right. We'll clean up on YouTube and Tippy. We'll call it a night. Chris Blair, hi, Truth Seekers. Wherever he is, I strongly suspect Francis has changed his mind about many things and he will no longer believe in the papacy or the Catholic Church. God bless. Wait, am I interpreting that correctly?
Jeez. He found out Catholicism was wrong.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, where is Francis? That's my question for this chat, but unclear. Long Dong John, I know you've been sick this Easter, Matt, but hey, now you know at least one guy who had a worse Easter than you. Who does Robert want to be the new Pope? Well, if you believe it was a terrible Easter, but it was also Easter itself, I suppose, was wonderful. It was the Good Friday that was particularly rough, right? So the Easter part was great, even for that guy. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to reject comparisons between my sickness and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I think they were different in severity. I will take that point. And yeah, Robert, do you have a candidate you would prefer for the next Pope?
I don't know of anyone in particular, but I would like to see a really conservative Catholic. Even if, I'm a Protestant, so that Pope may call me a heretic and condemn me to wherever, that's fine. I would like to see that. It's like, just don't cave to the modern, woke pressure. Because I really do wish the best for Catholics. I hope that nothing that I've said tonight offended them or anything. I hope the very best for them. And that's what they need. A strong leader who is not going to cave.
Yeah, I'm not a Catholic. I'm not Catholic hostile either. I want a strong Catholic Church insofar as I want more people in our country, around the world, to follow the teachings of Jesus. I think it produces a stronger family, a stronger country, better health for society. I even though obviously I have some questions about Pope Francis, the guy, I mean, that doesn't give me any hostility toward the institution of the church or the followers of the Catholic Church or anything like that. So, and most Catholics I know are pretty Francis realistic. I don't know a lot of Francis super fans, and yet there he was. So I think, most people who I know understand that. Pope Francis super chatted tonight. So wherever he is, he does have an internet connection. I have information that will lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
I am not suicidal.
Oh, well, okay. He was very old, so I think his death is plausible, actually. Does it matter? Shout out to the nephew who completed 485 and a half miles of the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage in Spain in March. Your journey has just begun. God bless you and Godspeed, young man. Well, that sounds pretty cool. I don't know what that is, but congratulations to your nephew. Are you familiar with this thing?
Yeah, this is kind of a famous pilgrimage that people do in Spain. Okay. They'll walk it. Generally speaking, sometimes people will ride their bicycles or do something like that. And it is quite lengthy. I cannot remember off the top of my head, but it will take them many days to do it.
People, if they're doing like a walk or a run, how long does that take? Almost 500 miles? It's the song. What was the name of that band? I will walk 500 miles and I will walk 500. Yeah.
Yep. It will take them several days. Now, if they were truly devout, they would do it on their knees. So I'm sorry, weak sauce.
People do pilgrimages on their knees?
Yeah, if you're like a saint or whatever, we can't aspire to that level.
Okay. The Proclaimers, wasn't it? The Proclaimers who did that song?
I don't know.
Check me out.
But I do know the song. I do know the song. And by the way, their trip is cool, like very cool. Congratulations to them. That'll be very meaningful.
All right. Congratulations. Does it matter? Congratulations to your nephew and all the best to your family. Appreciate your support for the show. All right. I think we are all set. Oh, you know what I forgot to mention? We didn't have email questions tonight. I skipped that part. And that's because I didn't actually have any email questions. So I just wanted to give everyone a reminder. If you'd like to send a question for consideration on the show, you can do that through the MC Live questions box on the contact page of my website. So mattchristiansenmedia.com/contact. Again, look for that MC Live questions box and we'll take email questions where we get them. But other than that, Robert, we are all finished up with Super Chat. Do you have anything else you want to say before we're out of here?
No, thank you for this opportunity to be on the show. And I will see you and at least a few of your viewers on Friday.
Yeah, I guess that's the only other thing I would say is Robert is wrapping up his Bible study tenure on Friday. So we are finishing up. We actually are done with the reading of Acts, and we're going to have kind of an Acts summary discussion on Friday, 9 Eastern. You can find out how to participate in that or listen to that through the Bible study page of my website, linked right there on the homepage. But anybody can join the Zoom call, 9 Eastern on Friday, and help us send Robert off. Now, Robert will probably still be appearing in the Bible study that is going to continue. I'm sure he'll stop by and he'll be a participant. He just won't be leading it anymore. But I'll have more Bible study related news later because we are going to continue, and that's going to be exciting too. But yeah, of course, thanks for joining tonight. And it was fun to do my stream with you, but thanks for everything you've done with the Bible study for, how many years have we done it now? 3 years? I forget. We started was it 21 or 22? I can't remember.
22, yeah.
But Robert has been instrumental in my personal journey to following Jesus. Robert was a huge part of that. So Robert has my gratitude in changing my life in that way too. And so I'm sure you'll see Robert around here or there in one way or another, but we'll call it a night there. Thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. Appreciate you guys live chatting. Appreciate you guys super chatting. Appreciate all your live participation to make the live production a success. But hey, if you're listening on demand later, thank you kindly as well for supporting the show. Much appreciated. Thanks to our callers this evening. Thanks to Robert for joining, of course. Thanks to producer Tim for his assistance as well. Anything show related, mattchristiansenmedia.com or mattis.gay if you prefer brevity. I'm back on Sunday and Wednesday nights. Have a great night and a great week.